Hey there, welcome to Mike's Collection, episode 257. I'm Mike, and the part of my collection that I'm going to be talking about today is some more Masters of the Universe Origins figures. Now, I'm going to be reviewing Wave 12. I just sat down earlier this week and recorded my video for Wave 11. So I'm trying to play catch up a little bit here. As I explained in that video, I've previously reviewed the first 10 waves as well as some of the extra stuff like Castle Grayskull and everything. But I've had 3 waves of these figures. I've had wave 11, 12, and 13. They're all kind of piling up on my desk. Plus I have a bunch of the Mattel website exclusive mail away figures. So I want to do a video focusing on them as well. So even though I have a bunch of toys to talk about here, some new Marvel Legends, some new G.I. Joe Classified, I really kind of want to get some of these Masters of the Universe out of the way so I can finally put them away on my shelf. So yeah, today we're going to focus on Wave 12, another 4 figures. This one should be relatively quick because as I usually do in these videos, I pull out past versions of these characters and do some comparisons. But with these 4 particular characters, I don't really have much in the way of comparisons. So yeah, I think we're going to move pretty quick. And I don't want to ramble too much here in this intro because, like I said, I literally just recorded my review of Wave 11 a couple of days ago. So yeah, if this seems a little vague for an introduction and you want to know a little bit more about the Masters of the Universe Origins figures, go back and check out my video for Wave 11 or Waves 1 through 10 while you're at it. So anyway, yeah, let's take a closer look at these figures. So in my last video, I started with Snake Armour He-Man, so I figure I might as well start this one off with Snake Armour Skeletor. But again, before I look at the figure, just like in my last episode, I do want to quickly mention that each one of these figures comes with this little piece of paperwork here that shows you which pieces are interchangeable. So you can pop off this guy's arms, his head, his boots, and he separates at the waist as well. And that allows you to customize some figures. So that's kind of a fun play feature if you actually, play with your toys rather than just throw them on a shelf for display like I do. And each figure comes with a mini comic book. So when you get a new wave of figures, which typically is 4 figures, all 4 figures in the wave come with the same mini comic, and it tends to star the characters in that wave. So the other 3 characters in this wave that we're going to be talking about later are these 3 guys featured on the cover. Skeletor is the only guy that didn't make the cut, but I'm sure he's inside wearing his snake armor here somewhere. And one thing to note is this comic has word captions. I mentioned in my last video that if you order the international release of these toys, that you get the comic book, but it's just the artwork. You don't get any of the words because I guess it's too much of a nuisance for them to translate into a bunch of different languages and try and fit all that in the captions. So yeah, this one here was the American release that I must have purchased. There's Skeletor in his snake armor, along with the other characters in the book, plus a couple other characters as well. So yeah, it's just like 4 or 5 pages. Shows you the other characters in the wave. And so yeah, those are kind of fun. A little throwback to the 80s. So as for the figure itself, there was one prior release of this figure, Snake Armour Skeletor, but I do not have it. So I cannot do an apples to apples comparison. I do not have the vintage Skeletor line from the 80s. When we were kids, me and my brother, we split all of our collections down the middle. And it just so happened that I had He-Man when I was a kid. My brother Doug had Skeletor. So I never owned the vintage Skeletor. However, there are other Skeletors in the Origins line that are modeled after the vintage, the original Skeletor. So this figure here from the Origins line, that one is basically looks like what the Skeletor from the 80s looked like. My first Skeletor didn't come around until the 2002 relaunch. And this here is the 2002 or 2000X Skeletor. And I really loved this look for Skeletor. He looks a little more evil. It's a lot more detailed. These 2002 figures were a lot more stylized. Now, one thing that's kind of a bummer, these figures are currently in storage for me. They haven't been on display in several years. And yeah, it's a bummer when you pull out a toy that you haven't looked at in a while and you see that he's yellowed. So his torso there used to be the exact same color as his arms. And so I don't know what it is, some sort of chemical reaction or whatever, but yeah, his torso has changed color pretty drastically. So that's kind of a bummer. So anyway, even though the Skeletor was kind of radically redesigned and he's a little more detailed, it was still modeled to look like this kind of classic, just blue and purple look. It's the original Skeletor look. Now, in the Classics line, which ran from 2009 to 2019 or so, they did all kinds of Skeletors. They did the classic Skeletor that looked like this. They did the Terror Claws Skeletor. They did the Battle Armor Skeletor. I have a lot of those. I'm not going to bring them all out for this video because it's not really relevant. I'll grab one of them just so you can see for scale. And this is my personal favorite one. This is the Filmation Skeletor. So this one looks like he did in the cartoons. And I think it's just a really great figure. So you can see they're quite a bit taller than the Origins line. So you can't really mix and match these two lines, which is kind of a bummer because I have a pretty close to complete Classics collection, but there was a few key characters I was missing. And it would be nice if I could just buy the Origins line and plug them into my collection, but it doesn't really work that way. They're just not really compatible. So I basically just started collecting them all over again. Now, for the 2002 look, so there was a new cartoon in 2002, a new toy line, but neither of them lasted very long, unfortunately. But in the short while where the toy line did exist, they came up with all kinds of weird variants for Skeletor and He-Man. I talked about that a little bit in my previous episode. There was like Arctic He-Man. I don't remember if there was an Arctic Skeletor. There might have been. There was Samurai He-Man, Samurai Skeletor. There was just all kinds of weird variations, and I really wasn't interested in buying most of them because I just thought they looked kind of silly. And Snake Armour Skeletor, that's where he originated. He was one of the 2002 era variants, and it just seemed kind of goofy to me. Plus, those figures were actually very hard to find here in Nova Scotia, Canada. You usually couldn't find them in stores. I usually had to order that stuff online. And it just really wasn't worth it to me to hunt down Snake Armour Skeletor. So I never got it, but I'll put a picture up here so you can sort of see comparison-wise what it looks like and how it compares to this version here. Now, in the Origins line, even though the original concept behind it was to make figures that looked like the old toy line from the 80s, they have started dabbling into doing toys that kind of pay homage to the 2002 line. So I showed you He-Man in the last episode. This here is an Origins Skeletor that is modeled after this Skeletor. So they've taken some of the changes in design, such as these more elaborate boots with the like red gems on them, the more elaborate sword and everything. That's based on the sword that this character came with. So they've gotten into that, so that's pretty cool. So I've got my 2002 version of Skeletor in the Origins line. And now they've went ahead and done another 2002 era update of a Skeletor. And this here is the Snake Armour Skeletor. And this time around, I figured, what the hell? I'm going to buy him. I kind of wish I did buy some of those goofy variants from back in the day. Just because they're kind of fun. They're kind of fun oddities to talk about on YouTube and stuff like that. So yeah, I wish I had bought them. So this time around with Origins, I'm pretty much buying everything they give me. So let's take a closer look at this guy. So you see here, he basically looks like a standard Skeletor with a couple extra accents. Like he's got this snake-themed helmet and this snake-themed chest armor, but otherwise he pretty much looks like a standard Skeletor from the waist down or from the neck down. Like if we look at his boots and his belt, like it's the same as this other Skeletor, except he's got a less paint apps. He doesn't have those red gems on there. But the belt and everything else seems to be pretty much the same. Now for accessories, he doesn't have his standard, do you call it a power sword? I don't know. He doesn't have his standard sword. Instead, he's got this shield, which has got kind of a cool emblem on it. It would be nice if it had some paint apps on it, so it wasn't just a big solid chunk of purple. But that's kind of standard in the Origins line. And it clips onto his arm like that. You can slide his fingers through this little handle here, and you can hold it pretty well. And then for a sword, yeah, so he's got this strange little sword. Now I imagine it is based off of the sword that the 2002 version of Snake Armour He-Man came with. But since I don't have that figure, I'm not 100% sure, but that would make sense that that's where this comes from. But it's a weird accessory in that it's hollow on one side. So it doesn't really seem like a believable like weapon that would be sharp or anything like that. One thing I will comment on is in previous videos where I've reviewed Origins figures, I complain that their weapons are constantly falling out of their hands. And actually, when I was trying to get these Skeletors to line up for this video, I was finding that too. These things just rest in their hands, and as soon as you start posing them, they tend to drop their accessories. With some of the newer figures, we're getting this kind of like ridged design, which I think was done to help the figures hold them a little bit better. And I do find that they do hold those ridged weapons a lot better. Like I'm shaking him around, and it's not falling out. If you had any of those early Wave 1 figures, he totally would have dropped his sword by now. Anyway, and I guess maybe I should quickly talk about articulation, or should I even bother? It's the same for all Origins figures. It's increased from the vintage figures. So the vintage figures, they did not have ankle articulation, they didn't have knee articulation, they didn't have elbow or wrist articulation. Their arms could only move forward and backwards. These guys' arms can move out to the side. So yeah, they're way better articulated than the vintage figures. But that's all I'll say about that. Now with this armor here, you can see it's got little belts on there, so this is removable. You could take this off, and then it looks like you would just have kind of a bare-chested Skeletor underneath. I have never taken it off, and I don't really intend to because I'm scared that I won't be able to get it on properly. The helmet, though, this does not look to be removable. That looks like it is permanently sculpted to the head. So that would look probably a little strange too if you removed this but just kept the head on. Now when I first saw this design in 2002, I thought it was stupid and pointless, and it didn't really enhance Skeletor in any way. I still don't think it enhances him. I don't think it's necessary, and I would be disappointed if this was the only Skeletor I had in my collection. But as kind of an odd variant, if you wanted to play with your toys and you wanted him to go off on a special mission or go up against the Snake Men, it's kind of cool to have this variant, and I actually do kind of like the look of it now. There's something about it that seems kind of like, I don't know, Egyptian to me, and that's kind of cool. So, yeah, I don't know if I have much more to say about this figure. He's kind of neat, but there's definitely better Skeletors out there, so if you only need one Skeletor in your Origins collection, this guy would probably be the fourth or fifth one down the ladder that I would recommend. So next up, we'll take a look at the character Hypno. Now, if you're not familiar with Hypno, I wouldn't be surprised, because this is a character that is brand new to Masters of the Universe, but he has actually existed since the 80s. I've talked about this in several videos, so I'll just do a very quick recap. But anyway, back when He-Man was at the height of its popularity in the 80s, there was a black woman who felt that the toy line wasn't diverse enough, and she thought there should be more diversity amongst the heroes and stuff. So she created her own toy line, basically modeled after Masters of the Universe. She kind of used the same style of a squat little 5-inch muscle man, and she made all these diverse characters. The toy line was called Sunman, and I don't know how popular it was. I never knew about it. I never saw those figures when I was a kid. But anyway, in recent years, Mattel has, I think they acquired the rights to Sunman, and they've integrated those Sunman characters into their Masters of the Universe line. And they've put out quite a few of them so far. So like early on, I got, this is Sunman himself. So you can see he's an African-American character. And I will just note that just the sculpting on this guy, like the way his facial features, the way his hair is sculpted, I think you can tell that he is an African-American character. And I think that's good. They didn't just take He-Man and color him black. They sculpted this guy so that he would be recognizable to black children, as somebody that they might know from their neighborhood and everything, and I think that's great. So I picked up Sunman, and then they put out his villain, Pighead, and I bought Pighead. They put out a couple others that I bought, but I kind of lost interest in it. I thought he was kind of an interesting curiosity, but after I got 2 or 3 of them, I was like, do I really need to keep buying these guys? Because I didn't find them particularly interesting. My favorite part of Masters of the Universe was always the more monstrous and robotic characters. I liked Merman and Mantenna and Buzz-Off and Stratos. Guys like He-Man and Clamp Champ and Man-at-Arms, those guys weren't my favorites. So I have no nostalgic ties to these Sunman characters, and they just seemed a little bland to me. However, every time I get one, I end up being won over by them. But another thing I find interesting about them is, like, this is another guy here. This is Digitino, so he is supposed to be like a Latino character. And again, I think they made some efforts to kind of make it look recognizable from the sculpting that he is Latino. But like, I find their themes, I guess, maybe a little confusing. Like, Merman is pretty straightforward. He's a fish man. Beast Man, pretty straightforward. He's like an ape man. But Digitino, he's like a Latino numbers guy with a glow-in-the-dark armor and like a crab claw on a stick. And I don't really understand what this guy's deal is. It seems like a little overly complicated. And I sort of feel the same way with Hypno here, in that, okay, he's a guy, he's got hypnotizing powers, and he's got this spinning hypnotizing wheel, similar to like Crystal Ball from the G.I. Joe line. I get that. That makes sense. But then they also gave him this metallic falcon. And it just seems to be, it makes the figure overly busy. Like, either make him a falconer, and he's got this maybe robotic bird he controls, or make him the hypnotized guy. It seems a little confusing to me. So I was initially going to pass on Hypno. I wasn't going to buy him. But in the previous wave, there was another Sunman character named Boltman, who I was going to pass on as well. And when I initially pre-ordered Wave 11, I did not order Boltman. But after I thought about it for a while, I had a change of heart, and I ordered him. So I got him a little bit later. Here's Boltman. I reviewed him in my last video for Wave 11. And I really like this guy. His powers seem a little more straightforward. He's got bolts. He's got a bolt on his chest. He throws bolts. He can use his bolts as swords. You know, it's pretty straightforward. He's Boltman. And I really like the look of him, in that he also has a very unique like facial structure. And the colors on him really pop. That baby blue, no other character really has colors like that in the Masters universe. His headband there and everything. I really like it. And I'm not entirely sure what ethnicity he's supposed to be. I kind of think he looks like Native American. And I also kind of think he looks like he could be like Mayan or something. But the way his face is sculpted, that's definitely the way I'm leaning. I think it's, one of those two. And anyway, because I like Boltman as much as I did, that's the reason I said, you know what, I'm not going to skip Hypno. I'm going to add him to my collection. I bet I'm going to end up liking him just as much as Boltman, because I really like how these characters, they really make an effort to put that sculpting into the face to capture a certain, nationality. So I was a little surprised when I got Hypno, because I never looked at him that closely. I've seen images of him online. He's usually wearing his helmet like that. But anyway, when I got him, I realized you take his helmet off, and he's just Boltman painted as a black guy. And I thought that seemed a little lazy, and I feel, it just, the color scheme doesn't match the sculpt as well on this guy. And I think it kind of diminishes the originality that we saw in the sculpt on Boltman. So, I don't know. However, like, repainting figures is nothing new. Masters of the Universe has shared a ton of parts amongst the different characters for a long time. But usually they got unique head sculpts. I was fine with them reusing everything from the neck down. But I like my characters to at least have unique faces. So yeah, it's always a bit of a bummer when you get a reused face. But especially for these two characters that, are really... The whole reason these guys were created was to represent minorities. And it just seems a little lazy that they painted one minority into another one. But anyway, all that said, I still like this figure quite a bit. The hypnotizing gimmick is cool, although I wish... Okay, yeah, that spins. Yeah, so there's a little thing on the back. You spin the thing, and this spins, so that's kind of cool. And like Skeletor, you'll see it's also ridged, so that holds in his hand pretty well. He doesn't drop that. Although his falcon here does not latch onto his wrist very well. I find when I try and pop that on, it pops right back off. So those don't really catch on either arm. I find it never catches on this arm at all. It just pops right off of there. It just does not clip into place. So you almost have to just kind of rest it there. But yeah, he does not clip into place. At least not for me. And then he's got the helmet, of course. So the helmet is good because it does help, separate him from Boltman a little bit. Once he's got his helmet on, it's not as noticeable. Because I think that headband, which is so unique to Boltman, really kind of helps to make him look unique on your shelf. So by covering up his headband, you don't notice those similarities, so much. But anyway, he's a fun character. I am enjoying these Sunman characters despite not having any nostalgic ties to them. I think they are fun additions to the Masters of the Universe line. So next up, we've got another member of the Snake Men. This here is Tung Lasher. And so this is pretty cool. The Snake Man army is growing. We've got King Hiss as one of the deluxe figures. In the last wave, we got both Ratlore and Cobra Khan. We still don't have Squeeze, but he's coming out in a future wave. So is Snakeface is due out pretty soon. So yeah, the Snake Man army is growing. And so this guy's pretty cool. Now, I actually do have the vintage Tung Lasher. However, he has seen better days. So here is my Tung Lasher. He doesn't have his legs. The vintage He-Man figures were held together with an elastic inside, sort of similar to the old G.I. Joes. But once it snaps, I definitely don't have the skills to replace it easily. So sadly, this guy's sitting in a bin with no legs these days. But otherwise, he looks like he's in pretty good shape, paint-wise. So all of the vintage Masters of the Universe figures had a gimmick. The simplest one was that if you spun them at the waist, they would, fly back in place and do a little roundhouse punch. But a lot of the other ones, like Mecha-Neck, who had his neck would grow, or Ram Man would spring forward and ram, things like that. Tung Lasher had kind of a cool one in that he's got this wheel on his back, and when you rolled the wheel, his tongue would go in and out. Now, this does it a little bit. If I roll it, you see his tongue protrudes. But I think this gear is jammed. It's supposed to wheel backwards, and this tongue, I think, should pretty much go all the way back into his mouth like so. Okay. So if I manually do it, it'll go in, and then you can spit it out. But then I can't use the wheel to get the tongue back in his mouth. But anyway, he was kind of a cool design. He always looked a little more amphibious than sneaky to me. Part of that might be because of his hands with those balls at the end of his fingers. That seems very frog-like. I know snakes do have tongues, but at the same time, you also associate these big long tongues with frogs. So yeah, he just had kind of a froggy vibe to me. Even his face is a little froggy, but they tell me he's a snake, so I guess he's a snake. So yeah, this is the vintage Tung Lasher. He did not get a figure in the 2002 toy line. He got a statue, which was in the same scale as the action figures. They were called Staction figures, but I never got that, unfortunately. But it was kind of a cool new redesign. He was much bigger and bulkier in the 2002 design. Anyway, I do have the Classics version that came out, sometime between 2009 and 2019. So you can see he's got all those same design elements, right across the board from the vintage one right through. They've all got a very similar look. He has the bulbous froggy fingers still. And I will mention too, for a crossbow, I think that's what this is supposed to be. He's got a big dragonfly, which again adds to his frogginess, because you associate frogs with swamps and dragonflies, whereas I don't necessarily associate snakes with swamps in the same way. So I don't know, maybe that's just me. The vintage figure had a dragonfly as well. I just don't have it handy. So yeah, interestingly enough, he's got those bulbous froggy fingers, but he does have clawed feet, which the vintage figure didn't have. So this is a new character design that they added in the Classics, which I don't know, it's hard to say that having spiky toes is more snake-like, because obviously snakes don't have toes, but it does seem less amphibian-like. So it seems like they were actively trying to lean out of the amphibian mode. I don't know. But anyway, this is a cool figure, but you'll notice he does not have a tongue. He does not have a wheel. But what he did have was an alternate head. So if you could swap his head out, and his other head had a big long tongue hanging out. I kind of prefer him without the tongue when I just keep him in my display. So that's how I choose to display him. Now with this guy here, He doesn't have an alternate head. He doesn't have a wheel on his back. So the tongue, it's just removable. So you just plop it out, and there you go. So you can either display him without the tongue, or you put the tongue in, and he's got his full extended tongue. So you can't kind of go mid-tongue the way you could with the vintage figure. It's either all or nothing. But yeah, he still looks great. I think he's very true to the vintage figure. Again, if we bring these guys back out side to side, very similar the way his teeth are all snaggled. The kind of camo paint on his arms and on his head. A little darker on the vintage one, but, pretty close. But, everything from the unpainted belt that just kind of blends into his shorts. They've kept that same design here. So very, very true to the vintage figure, except for the fact that he does have that increased articulation in the elbows and knees and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, this is a very cool figure. I'm happy to add him to my collection. I've always liked Tung Lasher. And I don't know if I have a whole lot more to say about this dude. So the last figure we have to look at in Wave 12 is Roboto. Specifically, this is called Mini-Comic Roboto. So as I showed you at the start of this video, Masters of the Universe figures, dating all the way back to the vintage line, they always came with those mini comic books. And sometimes the characters looked pretty different in the mini comics than how they actually looked in plastic, in the same way that sometimes the characters looked pretty different in the cartoon from how they appeared in the toys. And there's some of those designs in the comic books people have really liked, and they've always wanted figures that actually matched up to the mini comics. And starting in the Classics line and continuing into the Origins line, Mattel has been giving us some of those mini comic variants, if you will. So I've got a couple of them. Here is the mini comic Trapjaw. So if you're familiar with Trapjaw, he's usually blue and purple. That's how he looked in the cartoons and the vintage toy line and everything like that. But this is how he was colored in the mini comics. And so this is the mini comic variant that we have. So Trapjaw is available in both colors in the Origins line as well as the Classics line. And so that's pretty cool. And they're pretty drastically different as far as the designs go. Now the other mini comic figure I have is Triclops. I probably should have grabbed him as well. But the Triclops is quite different as well. His armor is different. The colors are different. They changed it up quite a bit. So I definitely wanted the mini comic versions of Trapjaw and Triclops when they released them, because I felt like the changes was drastic enough that it was justified. With Roboto here, I don't know. I don't think it's a change for the better, and I also don't know if it's different enough for me to really care. I don't remember the mini comic with Roboto looking like this, and to be honest, I may have never seen it. I never owned the vintage Roboto when I was a kid, neither did my brother, so I don't have that one to bring out here to show you. But I do have the previous Origins released, which is based off of the vintage figure. So this is how Roboto usually looked in the cartoon, and how he was colored in the vintage toy line. He's red, he's blue, and his kind of play feature, which this one actually retains, is when you turn his waist, his mouth goes up and down, and the gears in his chest turn around. So that's pretty cool that this still does the same play feature that the vintage toy had. So that's pretty cool. My first Roboto that I got was in the 2002 line. So here is 2002 Roboto, which I really like this design. It's just a lot more, sleeker. It's a lot cooler. It's a lot more stylized. And if you've watched my videos in the past, you might have heard me say that I really love characters with big feet. I just think it looks cool aesthetically, but I also like that it gives them a nice solid base to stand up as action figures so they don't topple over. And Roboto's got great big feet. He looks really cool. So I like this design a lot. Anyway, and then they also did Roboto in the Classics line, both the standard version and the Filmation version. Here's the Filmation one. I'll just bring him out here again for scale. So you can see he is quite a bit taller still. His design is a lot more simplified. His arms are much smoother than, say, this design because they're capturing the look from the old cartoon. He still has those gears in his chest and everything. I think that's a really cool figure too. So, anyway, all my Robotos are blue and red, as most Robotos are. This mini-comic one is orange. So if you like orange, I guess, then sure. But I don't think it's really an improvement. And then the other thing that you probably are noticing is that he's got this heart on his chest. And that ties right into the mini-comic. I think Roboto wanted a new heart, kind of like the Tin Man from Wizard of Oz or something. I don't remember exactly. But maybe that's true to how it looked in the mini-comic that this is based on, but that just looks super cheap to me. Like, that just looks like somebody cut that out with construction paper and slapped it on there. And again, maybe that's exactly what happened in the mini-comic. Maybe some kid put a little heart made out of paper on his chest, and so they're capturing that look. So if that's the case, then I guess I can't knock it too much. But it does look really sloppy there. And so I don't know. It's okay. Like, it's a fine figure. I like Roboto. If you missed out on this Roboto, this guy I think is a very decent substitution. I wouldn't be bent out of shape if this was the only Roboto I had. But if I could only have one Roboto, I would definitely want this version. Now, for accessories, he comes with some interchangeable hands, which goes back to the original toy. That was kind of always his gimmick. So you see I've got him with his axe, but you can pop that out. And he also has a claw, like so. And then he also has this kind of double-barreled gun, which is how I had this guy displayed as well. So, that's cool, I guess. It would be nice if he had somewhere to store his extra pieces. Like Trapjaw, actually. I'll grab him again. He's another character that has interchangeable hands. You can change out he's got a laser, but you can give him a hook and stuff. And you see on his belt, he can store his hook and his claw. So that way I don't have to go digging for them in a bin. He's carrying them around with him. So that's cool. So it would be nice if Roboto could do that as well. But I guess because the vintage toy didn't have that capability, they didn't want to change anything for this Origins figure. But I think they probably could have added a hook or two or something. That would have been nice. Anyway, you probably just noticed that when I spin him around, his mouth goes up and down. It still makes that little clicky sound. And the gears in his chest do still turn. It's not as noticeable here because they are gray and they kind of fade into that kind of clear background that's going on there. But anyway, yeah, Roboto's pretty cool. And I think that's all I've got to say about him. So that was my review of Wave 12 of Mattel's Masters of the Universe Origins figures. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please make sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave me comments below. Always happy to hear from you guys. Yeah, I think that's it. That's all I'm asking of you. Like, subscribe, comment, and come back next time. So I'll see you then. Ciao.